There's probably no hotter topic right now than multi-screen. Everybody knows that video isn't just going to be going to single screen. You saw that from Jeff Weber's presentation earlier. But it comes down to some of the real issues around, one of the real issues around that, it comes down to how you pay for that, or how you make it a revenue-generating proposition as opposed to just making it a customer convenience thing. You know, we can all talk about good relationships with customers and sticky services, but at the end of the day, I think we all want more money, right? So we thought we'd bring on a panel of experts, and you're going to see it does include, it's a very diverse group. Jeff Weber will be rejoining us, but you've also got a very diverse group of people led by Alan Bresnik, who's our cable analyst, senior analyst for heavy reading. So I think we're ready, so I can bring out Alan.
Thank you, Carol. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here in New Orleans. Unlike Carol, I'm not getting to stay in a hotel suite where a star football player stayed on Sunday night, but I did once see a star football player, so I sort of relate to that. We're going to get started on our general session panel, which is called Multi-Screen TV, Show Me the Money. In this session, we're going to explore the opportunities and challenges of monetizing multi-screen video. We'll look at what service providers, content providers, and Nielsen are trying to do with multi-platform video and the hurdles they're encountering. And we'll discuss what consumers will actually shell out money for. Let me begin by introducing our four panelists. We'll hear first from Colin Dixon, who's seated on the far left. Colin is a senior partner at the Diffusion Group, and he's one of the nation's leading experts, if not the leading expert, he'll probably quarrel with me about this, on consumer views about multi-screen video. The next speaker will be Matt O'Grady, sitting on Colin's right. Matt is Executive Vice President of Media Audience Measurement at Nielsen. Matt is probably the nation's preeminent expert on multi-screen viewing patterns and what they mean. Then we'll hear from Peter Roberts, who's Vice President of Sales, Strategy, and Development for Starz Entertainment. Peter is a top strategist for Starz, a major supplier of multi-screen content. Jeff Weber, Vice President of Uverse and Video Strategy for AT&T, who spoke earlier, will speak fourth. As you know, Jeff is a top strategist for AT&T, one of the leading service providers leading the multi-screen charge. Here's our agenda for the next 60 minutes. First, I'll run through a quick review of the TV Everywhere plans and initiatives that have already been announced in North America. I'll also outline the major challenges that network operators face and look at the monetization options and revenue potential of such services. Next, our panelists will delve into the issues surrounding multi-platform TV. They will make short opening comments about their multi-platform perspectives and experiences. Then we'll move into a discussion about the issues, and we'll also field your questions with the mics that we have in the audience. Okay. How interested are service providers in multi-screen video? In a webinar that we, I'm sorry, in trouble with the slides here. There we go. In a webinar that we first staged nearly 2 years ago, we polled network operators in the virtual audience about their multi-screen video plans and came up with these admittedly totally unscientific results. As you can see from this pie chart, more than 2/5 of providers said they plan to launch multi-screen service by the end of 2010. Another 25% plan to introduce service by the close of 2011. So overall, more than 2/3 of network providers aim to roll out multi-platform TV by the end of this year. In a similar webinar that we staged in August 2010, we asked the same question and came up with somewhat similar, though slightly lower results. 28% said they plan to launch multi-screen video by the end of 2010, another 17% by the end of 2011. So in that one, 45% aim to roll out multi-platform TV by the end of this year. Here's one of my favorite charts. It's a little bit of an eye chart, but it shows most, if not all, of the major TV Everywhere initiatives that have been announced in North America so far. Of these 17, Comcast, Rogers Communications, Verizon, and of course AT&T are probably the furthest along, at least among the pay TV providers. For instance, AT&T's Uverse online service now offers more than 175,000 video titles to Uverse TV subscribers who also have broadband connections. At the same time, AT&T's Uverse newer UVerse mobile service offers more than 100 TV series and 700 TV shows. Jeff will tell us more about that in a bit, as he did earlier. We're still waiting to see what kind of usage numbers AT&T, Comcast, Time Warner Cable, Verizon, and the others are generating with their new multi-screen services. One of the few usage numbers we've heard so far comes from the Toronto area, where Rogers announced that it had signed up 100,000 subscribers back in June 2010. Hopefully we'll get some more numbers today. We'll see. This is the content providers here on this slide. Despite such surging consumer interest in multi-screen viewing, plenty of implementation hurdles remain. These challenges range from such technical integration issues as user authentication and authorization to content licensing rights. They also range from the cost of managing content from multiple video platforms and devices to the need for improved search and navigation tools. All very tricky things to solve. But the largest obstacle to implementing the TV Everywhere concept may be a viable business model. In another poll that we conducted during that webinar I mentioned earlier, 40% of network operators cited building a profitable business model as the single biggest challenge in the multi-screen world. Only systems integration scored us high on the scale. No other potential hurdles came close. We did another survey about that in a later webinar, and the results were very similar. So what business models are service providers trying out for these multi-screen services so far? Basically, they're looking to make it as easy and cheap as possible for their current pay TV and broadband subscribers to add the extra screens so that nobody cuts the cord on them. But they're largely not allowing non-subscribers to tap into the services, at least not yet. So far, for instance, both Comcast and Rogers, the two cable operators furthest along, are not charging their existing video and broadband subscribers anything extra for the extra screen access. The same goes for AT&T, Verizon, and Bell Canada, which are the three telcos that are furthest along. On the content side, such major players as ESPN, Hulu, and most recently HBO are also not charging viewers anything extra for getting video on more than one screen. Instead, they are counting on increased ad revenues, mainly due to higher ad rates and or carriage fees from network operators. But that doesn't mean service and content providers couldn't make some fresh revenues from multi-screen video, which is what we're going to be discussing today. The options for new revenue opportunities include more personalized a la carte services, higher ad fees for more precise viewer targeting, special mobility fees for multi-screen access, and higher overall subscription fees. Colin will tell us more about that, I think. Not that I'm putting any extra pressure on you there, Colin. So what kind of extra revenue are we talking about here? Here's a chart showing what the potential payoff could be from these multi-screen services. It indicates what an extra $5 per basic video sub in monthly video subscription and or advertising revenue could mean for the cable industry's bottom line, though this could just as easily be applied to phone companies and other providers. As you can see, the nation's top 5 publicly owned MSOs could generate nearly $3 billion in additional annual revenue based on their Q1 subscriber totals. Indeed, Comcast alone would generate nearly an extra $1.4 billion in annual revenue, which is the equivalent of tens of thousands of new cable customers. Similarly, Verizon, with its 3.8 million video customers, would produce more than $230 million in extra annual revenue, and AT&T, with its 3.4 million subscribers, would generate more than $200 million in additional revenue. Despite its recent fall from grace, Netflix, which has displaced Comcast as the largest subscription video provider on the planet, is certainly showing the way. In 2010, Netflix, which has championed the $7.99 monthly rate for its video streaming service, generated more than $2 billion in revenue in the U.S. and Canada. Okay, with that, let's move on to our 4 panelists. I'll turn the mic over to Colin Dixon of the Fusion Group for his opening remarks. Colin?
So you had some interesting numbers up there, Alan. I guess the real question is how many people will actually follow through and pay for multi-screen service? Well, we love to ask consumers questions, and so we asked them how interested they were in multi-screen. And 40% of adult broadband users with pay TV subscriptions came back and they said, you know, we're really pretty enthusiastic about this type of functionality. But in our book, enthusiastic doesn't count. What counts is the cash, right? But the good news is that 25% said that they were actually willing to pay. But how much? If you try and charge $15 or more a month for this service, you're going to be pretty unhappy with the result. Only about 7% will be interested in subscribing at that rate. It was significant that Alan had $5 there, because if you hit that $5 price point, you're going to get the majority of the people. In fact, you will probably get all of the 25% that say that they will pay. Significantly less, something like 16% will pay $10 or more a month. Now, this is a very interesting price point, between $5 and $10. Notice that the online services are all charging in that price range. Happens $8, pretty much bang smack in the middle. But this actually brings up a very interesting problem. If you were to charge your customers $5 for multi-screen access today, we think that a substantial number of those people who said that they would pay would actually follow through and do so. I actually don't think it would be the full 25%. It will probably be between a third and a half of those people would actually follow through and pay. The problem is that as we look out at the competition that pay TV is now starting to see online, that is part of the platform. And you don't pay extra. So I think that is the great problem. There is a market window now where maybe you can get $5 a month for multi-screen service. But looking out, even just a year from today, it will become increasingly difficult to charge this. And this is perhaps why we're seeing most of the TV Everywhere providers today simply not charging. Because we know that consumers are very enthusiastic about this functionality. But we also know that maybe it's just not worth charging in the first place, since competitively you just maybe won't be able to.
Thanks, Colin. Matt?
Hi, thank you. So I work at Nielsen, and I handle our TV audience measurement products as well as our online and mobile products. And we used to put out a report, which we call the three-screen report, which now I've had to get rid of that term because it really is no longer about three screens. And we call it the cross-platform report. We put it out quarterly. It's for public release. You can go to the Nielsen website, but it really is sort of our Bible, or the thing most commonly quoted. And so what we do is report what we're seeing as far as viewing trends or patterns from quarter to quarter every year. So we're always looking at, because TV is cyclical and viewing patterns are cyclical. You will watch more TV, around the Super Bowl in the winter months or in the fall when the new programming and new broadcast lineups, happen, et cetera. But I wish it had stayed to three screens, because it certainly hasn't. There's what I call iPad hysteria out there right now. Everybody's thinking that the iPad, for all intents and purposes, is becoming a cordless, wireless TV. There's certainly apps that media companies are putting out there, but not every cable operator has a multi-channel service app. But that's something that's made three screens no longer relevant. And then when you look at all the devices that are connected to the TV, and I was talking with Jeff about this earlier, there's so much attention on the latest, hottest, and newest mobile devices, newest tablets, etc. But 43% of households has a gaming console attached to the TV. And majority of those also have internet access. And that's a whole new way of streaming content, that we're tracking and that everybody needs to be aware of as well. So when you step back and look at, regardless of the number of screens or the number of devices connected to the TV, look at the consumer viewing experience. They're far more in control. which we know. But what does that mean? It means that it's time-shifted viewing. It's on-demand viewing, like video on demand. It's my favorite feature, the start over button, because I'm chronically late, 15 minutes into an episode. It also leads to video streaming or any online viewing. Nielsen, several years ago, fully supported when TV Everywhere was announced because of the relevance of video and on-stream viewing. And all of that sort of melds together as time-shifted viewing for the consumer. Then you have all these other devices that makes it a little more confusing or more interesting, from our perspective, such as the iPad, the gaming consoles, Roku, Boxee, Google TV, Apple TV, and any of the other IPTV services. So it falls into those particular buckets of time-shifted, device-shifted, and those willing to utilize those services continues to rise. And I'm sure Peter will have more to say about Netflix than I will, or somebody will. But, that whole Netflix and Hulu phenomenon has really given media companies sort of the motivation to look at their on-demand content to see if that can be monetized. It's sitting there in somebody's DVR or in their digital box, and there's enormous opportunity, I think, to monetize those assets. So from an engineering perspective, our world is all about metering, then measuring, and reporting out all the content, who viewed what, on what device, as quickly as possible. Some of it's done today. TV, PC, Macs, they work very well. Mobile devices, there's very little streaming that happens on mobile devices. 97% of all Americans have a TV and watch TV. Usually up to the average for second quarter was 146 hours a month. And that's just the average. That's not seniors and other ethnic groups that watch more. Watching video on a PC or Mac is only 50% of the American population. Watching video on a mobile device is 10%. So my comment is just keep it all in perspective. iPad measurement and tablet prices continue to come down. You'll see more and more viewing. But an iPad right now is $499. You can get a great flat screen TV for $499. And and we are not the audience of America in this room. I'm sure you have numerous gadgets you're traveling with, and you decide whether to take your laptop or your iPad or both when you go. But that is not, the country that we live in. If you drive 2 hours north of here, you're much more likely to see a gaming console in that living room than an iPad, on the kitchen counter. So, those are my comments. Jeff.
Thanks for that perspective, Matt. Peter?
Yeah, thanks. I thought I'd give a little bit of overview about how we're approaching the multi-screen video initiative within Starz. From a service standpoint, we're aligning our content to our core brands out in the marketplace today. So we have Starz, which is focused on our content, our output content from Sony and Disney, as well as our growing catalog of original content. And so we have 300 assets that are available for multi-screen viewing for those 19 or so million Starz customers. For Encore and those 33 million Encore customers, we also have 300 assets of classic library movies that are available. And the Movieplex is a deeper library service that's also available. In terms of how we support the multi-screen effort, our focus has been integrating that content into the MVPD's platform. We feel that that's the best approach because that gives the retailer, the MVPD, control and flexibility and, frankly, consistency of the offering that allows them to do what they do best, which is be the retailer to their customers. A little bit about consistency, which I think is important. They both have the consistency in terms of the video experience, which is becoming much more complex as we go across screens, and that is across content providers that will differentiate them in the marketplace, but also just on a count standpoint, by enabling IP, the content count that I gave, those 800 assets, can be available on all screens, including the television set. So there you provide a lot of value to our customers, the MVPD, and their end consumers. I wanted to leave with 3 kind of high-level learnings that we have as we've deployed a number of key customers into the marketplace, Xfinity, Dish, as well as most recently AT&T with Jeff's group, which is the amount of effort to integrate this actually takes quite a bit of time. And I would say, as a rule of thumb, 6 to 10 months in order to deploy into the affiliates, infrastructure. So planning is very important, and making sure you have the right resources is critical. The other challenge is on the user interface side, and the importance of having a very simple user interface. And I've been in many UI discussions, and it's much easier for the team to talk about what to add to the user interface versus what to subtract. And so it's really, really hard to do. And I'll say that that is only getting more challenging as the retailer adds more content and the brand requirements that the programmers put on the retailer. But getting that right is paramount. The last piece is more on the communication side, which is, as was mentioned, we're still very early in this development cycle, and the need to communicate to your customers about this functionality is critical. A quick example, Stars has worked with AT&T with the recent launch, and we have a billboard campaign out promoting these services. So just one example of ways to communicate out to your customer base.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Jeff, since you were our keynoter, we saved you for last.
Thank you. Well, at the risk of boring you a second time, I won't go all the way through it. I think, the highlight here, and you've heard some of it with the panel, is in particular around content, driving consumption. I am far less focused right now on the precise business model. Can we get $5? Can we get $8? Can we get whatever dollars? That obviously is going to sort as we go forward, and we'll find the right mechanism to price for our consumers. Do you put part of it into a package or into some packages? Do you charge separately? All that we'll work through. Right now, the focus is very much what Peter's talking about. Make the experience good, make sure customers want to consume, that they're heavily engaged with it, all of those things we talked about earlier, and I think the rest will take care of itself.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. I'm going to start off with some questions for the panel, and then we'll get into some audience questions after that, so individual for each of them. Colin, I'll start with you. You talked about those who expressed willingness to pay for multi-screen video. How many of those do you think will actually pay based on past experience, and do you think that's enough? There'll be enough to support a business model.
So as I said, I think about a third to a half of the 25% that say they would pay will pay.
Right. So is that enough to support a service?
I think that may be the wrong question.
Okay.
I think what we have to look at is, what does it mean to be a MVPD today? And I think the definition of what that is changing pretty radically. This is partly due to just the evolution, the way we've seen consumers evolve in the way they approach media, which was really started, of course, with the DVR and with on-demand watching. And what we're now seeing is the full impact of the internet and connectivity on that model. And to say we're just at the beginning is an understatement. Right now, we are just struggling with the connectivity piece, getting all the pieces connected and getting all the pieces able to receive good quality video. As Matt mentioned, there's a bunch of people who are already using game consoles, but that's still not every household, and still not every household can get TV services at their television. So if we think about what does it mean to be an operator in this new environment, it means that we're really beginning to, for the first time, to take something which has specifically been associated with the television and move it out from there and disassociate it with any individual screen. Mm-hmm. And the service is now becoming a cloud service in very much the same way as a Netflix and what have you is a cloud service. And as Jeff has said, it's all about the entertainment experience you deliver and how you deliver it. So to some extent, I think it's the wrong question to ask about, is it enough to support the service? I think that's what the service is now. Therefore, whether you can charge for it or not is another question.
Right. Okay. So there's a question of whether you can charge for it now, but you consider that irrelevant at this point.
If you can charge $5 for it now and earn a bit for a couple of years, more power to you. But it won't last.
Okay. All right. Matt, question for you. Can you get into the specifics of how Nielsen will measure multi-screen video? And will you attach a people meter to an iPad, or how will you do this? How do you measure programming and advertising?
Without putting everybody to sleep? Look, some devices are easier to measure and others are less so. Online or a PC or a Mac, you have a software meter that gets installed and you become part of a panel. Right. In the home, we have, the very well-known people meters. On mobile devices, we have an on-device meter as well, which is software or a proxy server solution. Now, the iPad is, the iOS operating system, whether it's an iPhone or an iPad, has been a little more interesting, shall I say, for us because, you can't have two applications running simultaneously, and they were not going to let us put it into the operating system itself. Mm-hmm. However, the way that people get credit is to ensure that the audio code and the signatures that are embedded in the content or in the program are recognized. So we're working on a solution that enables to take, and the audio code or the watermark is really just a line of text, getting that onto the ID3 tag. Apple uses, HLS, HTTPS streaming as their method for streaming video. And so, it is the cordless wireless TV. The technology actually is really not the hard problem. We'll figure all that out. We've got an army of engineers. The harder part is the methodology, ensuring that it's truly representative of viewing, that you get a representative sample that's accepted by, we work with the Media Ratings Council, the MRC, which is, sort of the authorization board for all measurement companies. So it's a very important thing to have MRC accreditation because then you're saying you're doing what you're supposed to do. So some devices are easier than others, and we follow where the money is. Because quite honestly, making sure the audio codes and the watermarks are coming through a gaming console right. is because so much viewing. I mean, viewing in the last year alone went up 14% on a gaming console. Right. We want that watermark to show up as much as I want to come up with an iPad solution.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm wondering. I can just see people filling out their diaries and saying, "I watched 2 hours of video on my iPad, and I watched 1 hour on my Xbox 360, and I did a half hour on my
Fortunately,
phone."
those days are ending. And the thing about America is it's a very big country. You have 200 markets, 210 DMAs that you got to track for local business, and then you have the national broadcasters and national cable networks. So, look, the more complex it is, the better off for Nielsen. We're really pretty good at that stuff.
Okay. Peter, I'm going to ask you about your favorite subject about Netflix. Starz recently broke off contract renewal talks with Netflix. You knew this was coming. Can you tell us why? And then go into, as a premium programmer, how do you go multi-screen while protecting your existing distributors and your existing business model?
You've waited 30 minutes. That's pretty good. No, we got to it.
Usually it's the first 5 minutes.
So, clearly I can't talk about any specific discussions with affiliates,
right.
or lack of, in this case, with Netflix. But what I will say is that it's paramount for Starz to protect the premium nature of our content. Mm-hmm. In terms of the second half of your question, I think the benefit of the authentication model is that it aligns the business objectives with our business customer, the MVPD, and allows us to do a lot of interesting things that IP can do. Mm-hmm. And the nice position that Starz is in is that we have the rights to enable our content across screens and can work collaboratively with our business partners to create those experiences. So when you hear things like enabling your content on an Xbox, in terms of what AT&T is doing, those are things that really weren't thought of a year or two ago, that Starz has the flexibility to partner with its retailers to provide new experiences across screens. So, what I think lastly is interesting is a year or so ago, it was focused on the PC, and now you look at the rate of change, and there's a lot more options out there, and certainly it's more complex, but it gives us a lot more flexibility to create unique experiences with our business customers.
Can you give us any hints about what we should expect to see from Stars in the next 6 months or a year? New multi-screen initiatives?
Well, I can speak to what's out in the marketplace today with Xfinity as an example, because that kind of lays out certainly some of the rights that we have, which is the benefit of offering, again, across screens. So whether it's PC or Mac or on iPads or iPhones or, frankly, Netflix, since you brought it up, in terms of how they've leveraged their experience and our rights, there's a pretty broad spectrum of new ways to get to customers, and that's certainly part of our toolkit.
Okay, thanks. Jeff, I won't leave you out. You talked about this earlier during your keynote. Can you tell us a little bit more about how many multi-screen customers AT&T may have now and how you plan to monetize the customers that you've signed up for it?
Sure. So in terms of the number of customers using multi-screen, I think the capstone number I talked about earlier was 75%. By the end of the year, 75% of our customers, UVerse TV customers, are engaging on a different screen. And then they may be engaging on multiple different screens. They may be consuming content. They may be controlling their content, but they're interacting with their TV in some way, shape, or form on a phone, on a tablet, on a laptop, etc. And so underneath that are all of the individual measurements, and we can those shared some of those numbers, but I think that's the macro number, and that's the number that matters to us. And from a monetizing perspective, we have the luxury at some level of thinking about it with a 4-screen service. And I mentioned the number, our triple play customers are at about $170 ARPU, and the wireless ARPU is on top of that. So those customers are really good customers for us. And so I am way more interested in getting them engaged, making sure they're satisfied, and they have all 4 of our services than I am putting another $2 charge on top of that 170. That's not how we're going to make our money. It's keeping those customers a long time and adding customers that buy 3 and 4 services with us. So it's pretty clear from our perspective on monetizing. Now, if the world opens up and the content model falls out that we're going to go get $20 for TV everywhere, we're all about that. We're open to that. But I'm not sure that's how it's going to go.
Okay. Question for the whole panel. How worried are you all about cord cutting, and how much cord cutting are you seeing happening out there? We get all sorts of different survey information right now.
We're not seeing it. We watch this very closely because there's just so much at stake here. But as I said, 97% of American homes have a TV. 91% of that 97 are still paying for multi-channel service, telco, cable, operator. There's 1% that we've been watching very closely, and certainly if anything is going on, they're swapping or shifting. So that 1% may rotate. Somebody may drop it, but somebody else is picking it up. But there is definitely swapping going between cable, telco, and satellite, but it's not going away. People are willing to pay, for that content. What has happened is we've seen over the past couple of years, and a lot of this is economic, and a lot of it is also people who didn't survive the digital transition. There are less TV households. 5 years ago or so, we were close to 99% of TV households that had a TV. We're now around 97.
And that's a first, right? We've never gone down.
It went down once before, but it is so dramatic because there is so much, TV is so successful. Content is so good,
So
that
people are chucking their TVs out their windows?
No, they're not doing that. They can't afford it. Like, look, there is really some hardship on the lower end of the spectrum that we need to acknowledge. These are people who can't afford their electric bill. They can't afford TV. They didn't survive the digital transition. The big question is the 22-year-old. They're out of college. They may not have had a TV for the past couple of years. Are they willing to pay for it? So that I don't have the answer to, but that is something that, Colin, you'll probably study very closely.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I thought maybe the bigger threat is not the people who already have the cord cutting it, but the people who never had the cord to begin with never getting it.
Yeah, and those people they're used to getting their content in an entirely different way to the way we are. today. So interestingly, I'm just wondering if I should say this. I had an interesting conversation with my college-age son this weekend, and he uses Netflix, and I said, "Oh, so who's paying?" And his response was, "Oh, I don't know, the account's registered to some guy called X. I don't know who he is." I was kind of surprised.
Right.
So yes, certainly that is the big question. But I tell you, there is one area of the market where we are beginning to see the impact of alternatives. But it's still small. We survey a lot. And what we found was when we surveyed consumers this year, 25% of them told us that they were considering downgrading their service, dropping HBO, dropping to a lower tier of service.
So shaving the cord, not cutting.
Shaving the cord. And, when we asked them why, Matt's absolutely right. 50% said this is an economic issue.
Right.
And about a fifth said, actually, it's OTT. We're starting to use OTT services more. But the thing that I think we should all keep in mind here is that when those people, if they follow through and shave, they will look for alternatives. And there are cheaper alternatives. And if they find those cheaper alternatives appealing, they may not, when economic times change, come back because they're very satisfied with that. The other thing that that was really disturbing this year was last year when we asked this question about cord shaving, only 17% of people said that they were considering doing it. So that's a very big uptick. And last year, HBO Cinemax lost 1.6 million subscribers, which is a substantial impact.
Right.
So yes, we are seeing a strong economic impact, but before there was no alternative. Now there is. And I think people are starting to look at those as serious alternatives.
It's interesting, even Netflix is now seeing a strong economic impact, right? When they start raising prices, right?
Well, they did see some impact. Let's be clear. Hidden in those numbers. Okay, so here's what happened, right? They announced their results yesterday, and I think they said 3.52. In the previous quarter, they saw churn of 3.52 million, which is, by the way, extremely high churn.
Right.
But in the quarter just ending, where they've had all this nonsense with these missteps with pricing and with Quickster and whatever, churn went up to 5.52, 2 million extra. And funnily enough, we surveyed consumers right after the price increases, and when we churned the numbers, we estimated 2 million people would probably quit over this issue. So make no mistake, the economic issue is something that OTT providers are not immune to.
Right.
Now, luckily for Netflix, they managed to pick up 1.2 million new subscribers, which compensated somewhat for the loss, so they only ended up losing about 800,000 in total. But nobody is immune to the economic factor.
Right. Jeff, what are you seeing at AT&T? Cord cutting, cord shaving, never getting the cord?
We're not seeing the cord cutting. It is much more of, and it's not really prevalent at all, even at the trimming level. And so we've been pretty fortunate. Now, we put a lot of value in our larger packages. You get DVR, you get a lot of HD. So we sort of drive the value set in a way that I think helps us there. But the economic factors are what they are. And to the point, we're not immune to that. I think the broader question, what you're seeing is there was some differences in the way rights were priced. And I think you're just seeing the industry do two things at once, which drives a lot of the confusion. The first thing it's doing is there's a rationalization. For a certain grant of rights, it costs X. And I might pay a little bit more if I don't have as many subs, but generally grant of rights costs a certain amount of money. That's the first thing, and that's being rationalized right now, and that's causing all kinds of upset in the industry. The second thing is I think it's a little less clear how this is going to shake out, but different windows are being created, and that will provide everybody, including OTT players, with the opportunity to fit into niches, whether that is a competitive opportunity from a cord cutting or it's simply an incremental or complementary opportunity, will play out. But both of those things are happening at the same time, and everybody moves at different rates. But I think over time, those two things are going to sort. People are going to pay the same amount for a certain grant of rights, and there's probably a finer and finer slicing of the grant of rights. And people can put those things together in ways that allows them to play where they want to go play. That's, I think, the broad macro trend over the next 18 months. 18 years. 18 months.
Seems like 18 years.
Yeah. And so we'll see that play out.
Okay. So will the broadband subscription become more important than the video subscription?
The content is really important. And so how you put together a package, if you're broadband focused, may look one way versus if you're TV focused, may look another. But I think I don't know that it's one or the other. You're going to want both, obviously, to get the complete service.
Right. Okay. Peter, what's Star's perspective on that?
I concur with what Jeff and the rest of the folks said. We're certainly not seeing any evidence of it. And in fact, from a unit standpoint, our Stars customers continue to grow, and I think for us it's sticking to our knitting, which is make sure we have the exclusive rights from our Hollywood partners and continue to invest in original programming and then sharing that across screens. So that's what's going to make us most valued.
Okay. Are you worried about the next generation coming up and whether they're going to subscribe to multi-channel video?
Yeah, I think just as we mentioned, you definitely need to monitor that and understand where where that viewing is. I think what's unique about it is that there are alternatives that are much easier to watch on the television and elsewhere than there have been in the past. So we need to recognize that and see if we need to react. But at this point, we feel very comfortable with our approach.
Okay.
Hey, Alan, one thing that should be noted is that the second, third, and fourth screens are not cannibalizing traditional linear TV viewing.
Right, and that's a surprise, isn't it?
The incoming, tide is rising all the boats.
Right.
But there are definitely different pricing models of what you can monetize on TV, which is so lucrative, and on other screens less so. And there's it's very clear how you trade on TV and how you make money, and the repeat frequency on these other screens actually helps the primary screen and helps the advertiser as well. We're launching an online campaign rating so that we can bring some logic, and some accountability to the buying and selling in the online universe. But it's that is helping. All the other screening, the consumer's demand for content is almost, unsatisfiable. It just continues to go up with all the different screening devices.
So if people are watching more video on all their screens, is it that they're watching several screens at once in some cases, or are they just not sleeping anymore? I mean, where are they getting this time? So we'll keep watching more
The
video?
Simultaneous usage is not usually two videos, unless they have serious, attention deficit disorder or something. But because it's very hard to, they're engaged with Facebook, they're engaged in kind of social media, or they're answering emails. And it isn't always with a laptop. It's often with a tablet or a mobile device now.
Right.
So,
So are we going to grow like a third eye or a fourth eye so we can keep... Can
we continually expand the amount of content that we watch? The answer is simply no. Is there a little bit of flexibility in the numbers right now? Yes. But look, if you go and talk to Netflix subscribers, Netflix streamers in particular, what you find is something pretty interesting. You find that actually they are watching a lot of Netflix, on average something like 4 hours, 5 hours a week. Mm-hmm. So this is becoming like one of the main TV quote channels that these people consume, me included. If you ask them how this makes them think about their pay TV subscription, for those Netflix streamers, they are no more likely to cancel than anybody else. And in fact, if you look at the profile, they actually pay, on average, slightly more than other people. But if you then ask them how much television they watch and compare them with the average, they're watching less because they're watching more on Netflix.
On the TV.
So this is not on the TV. This is not a zero-sum game.
Right.
It's not, excuse me, it is to some extent, a zero-sum game. It is one does shrink the other.
Okay. We'll take some questions from the audience now if people want to line up by the mics. I have plenty of questions up here, but if anybody has questions, please walk up to the mics and we'll address that. Assuming there is a business model for multi-screen video, what do you think the model will be? Will it be a basic subscription model? Will it be an ad-supported model? Will it be a transactional model? Will it be some mix of it? Or will it be something entirely new that no one's ever thought of before? And now that Steve Jobs is gone, he won't be able to think of it either.
I think what the CW did recently, with Netflix is very interesting because they had an online audience that wasn't watching linear as much, and so Gossip Girl and Vampire Diaries, they're probably going to be able to make, decent money. I think it was $700,000 an episode for Gossip Girls via Netflix, as opposed to what would they get in syndication. The thing that a TV or a media company, or Peter probably has to consider is syndication going to make me more money, or is some other distributor, iTunes or Netflix or Amazon, going to make me more money? Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting model. Because syndication's been a very, very profitable model for a long time.
What does the rest of the panel think? Colin, I know you must have an opinion on this.
The market for mainstream television content has been expanded pretty dramatically by people like Netflix. There's no question about that. I guess the thing that we haven't talked about at all on the panel is that mainstream content isn't the only game in town anymore. Mm-hmm. And particularly, you mentioned the younger viewer. They're spending a lot of time on other services, Vivo, Revision 3, much more edgier content. And I think what we're going to see is an explosion of alternative content that isn't carried on cable today. And this is, you may think if you're a pay TV or telco TV provider, this may sound like a threat to you, but actually it could end up being an opportunity for you to help your customer find this and help your customer experience this better with your services than on anybody else's. So it could actually, since it's not being carried on your pay TV, it could actually end up being a complement to the pay TV service. My worry is that we talked about the young end. If the young end don't embrace pay TV, and I think it's highly likely that a large proportion won't,
right,
they'll start consuming this other content, and then you could have lost a potential customer forever there for your pay TV service. But it's not all bad because they're still going to buy your broadband. So if I was in AT&T's shoes right now, I'd be launching services specifically on broadband, media services for those guys that come and buy my broadband.
Okay. Jeff, what do you think of that?
Well, if customers, young or old, can get the content for free in other ways, they're going to go do that. And obviously the young are going to be more aggressive about doing that, more open to the technology. So if the windows that I talked about, if the grant of rights doesn't rationalize so services pay the same thing for the same grant of rights, and you can go online and get stuff for free, absolutely they're going to do that. I don't know what the business model is around that. I mean, that is very, very difficult, and nobody has found a model that makes sense. So I'm skeptical that that's going to emerge, but if it does, or if the content stays out there at a below market, if you will, of course they're going to do that. I mean, it just makes sense. So my guess is there is a host of content, and I agree, we need to be, as a paid TV provider, in the business of making content available, not making content available that comes from a certain business model. And as an IP provider, I think that's a terrific thing for us. I completely agree with that. And so the only difference is I think that's part of the paid TV service offering, not just a standalone broadband offering.
Peter?
Yeah, I would say incumbency has a lot of value, and so MVPDs are well positioned to enable other screens. And I really think of it as, in the past you've had a subscription for television service. In the future you're going to have that same subscription but enabled on other screens, but that the price will be for all those services and there won't be distinct charges, in my view, for these other screens. So keep it simple, enable the experience on these other screens. I think we're seeing it initially with on-demand, but you could see linear streaming kind of follow from that and customized by screen, but it's really the same subscription, basic, premium, and what that paradigm is, but now just expanded across more options.
Okay. Let's, if we could, move the slides back one and go back to the slide that shows all the different monetization options. Great. There's a question, I think the gentleman over there in the third row. Yeah, you.
I just have two questions actually. One, the first question actually was just briefly explored just now, which is around curation of long form but long tail content and bundling of that kind of content with pay TV mainstream content. What underlying currents are you seeing, panelists, on that particular front where, the numbers are pretty huge. About 3,500 videos are uploaded to YouTube every day. And granted about 90% of it is crap, but is there an underlying current in the longer term where discovery of pro-am, professional and amateur produced content can be monetized by bundling it with mainstream content, to address some of these questions that Colin brought up? And then I have a second question on advertising I'll ask later.
So
go ahead, please.
I would say that is the single biggest threat, if you will, to the current business model, the current pay TV model. And it's way more than 90%, but I take the point. So whatever percent, 1 or 2% that's sort of in the reasonable to really good category, and as young talent largely starts to put content out there in a way, you still have to put a business model around it, but it's not going to be the current pay TV model. So it's a pay-per-view with a complete grant of rights or whatever it is. But I think that's where, and Google's put $100 million against exactly that notion. So I think that's clearly a part of what's going to be in the broad pay TV system, but it's a different model.
So are any of you, particularly stars or other content aggregators, working with YouTube, for example, on something like that, where Google has put about massive amounts of money behind the hub or whatever it's called project?
Yeah, well, I'll just build on what Jeff said. I think what I like about what Google TV has done is it's the chicken or egg dilemma. So here you have the funding kind of in advance of the content creation, so it does get things going. We're not in a position to discuss any particular discussions with folk, but our focus is still around the theatrical content and original, so that's a slightly different game. Although I will say that when you look at overall viewing patterns, you still have the biggest box office titles and key originals driving the bulk of viewership.
The interesting thing we're also seeing online is that now you're seeing some quite sizable amounts of money being pointed at original content online. So I think Google and Yahoo have both had significant announcements in this space just recently, and there are others. Like Patricia Heaton has been involved in a project online which is original, quite good quality content. You asked a couple of interesting questions, and I think there are some opportunities inherent in those. One of the things is that with all of this extra content that's coming into our lives, there is a huge opportunity, I think, and an opportunity for operators in particular to help us find stuff and organize it. And those things are directly monetizable in things like advertising in guides and advertising around the content that you're helping the consumer find. So not least to mention the fact that you start helping consumers find the things they want across all of the content choices. you'll be beloved by them. Helping people find cool stuff to watch is a very interesting space. And we are actually seeing a lot of activity now in this area of discovery. It's generating a lot of interest. I'm seeing startups. I'm seeing a lot of activity here in mood searching and stuff like that. So, I think these things are pretty directly monetizable through advertising as well. So
that actually segues into my second question, which was around advertising, specifically around mainstream but multi-screen content. And we spend a lot of time talking about $5 or $8 on subscription, but what are your views on, especially maybe Jeff, or in terms of MVPDs monetizing multi-screen through primarily as advertising revenue, and then focusing on the bundle and the retention and the $170 as the subscription model?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's clearly advertising opportunity on the other screens. I think the way you get those grant of rights is going to come with advertising restrictions or opportunities tied to them. So I think that's part of what's going to sort out, quite frankly. But there's no question there's opportunity in there. It'll be shared between the content provider and us, and that's what gets sorted. I think it's a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, there's some really cool opportunities outside the C3 window as well to refresh advertising and existing content that's still very recent. And you can go in and resell a new ad in that slot, much akin to the way Hulu handles things. And targeting does seem to be having a good effect on the price of the ads in those opportunities. So there's lots of opportunities.
Yeah, and post C3 is wild, wild west. I mean, it's wide open right now.
I think what we'll probably see is, and we're being asked from the media properties, the advertisers and the operators, is the ability to have more flexibility. Measure the program with or without commercials, the commercials with or without program. Well, they'll always be together, but just the granularity of commercial identification cross-platform. That's what everybody wants to know. And even when we get there, though, it's not Nielsen's decision to say, do this. The industry has to decide. The buyers and sellers have to agree. C3 was, a very easy way for people to recognize the average of the commercials seen over a 3-day window. It works very well. Everybody's sort of, cautious about opening that model. But what we're working on is to ensure that people can see the actual audience that's on all the different screens, the program with or without commercials, as well as the commercials that are viewed. So commercial identification within the pod, and on other screens as well, so that you get the total cross-platform campaign view of it all.
Isn't that the beauty of OTT, though? I mean, Hulu knows this. Absolutely. Right? They know. How many people saw that ad? They know. It's in the platform. Isn't that the beauty of it?
Right. Is Madison Avenue showing much interest in advertising on other screens?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very clear the reach and frequency you get on TV. Mm-hmm. There are many metrics and many different ways to measure online. So that's why we're launching this online campaign rating in conjunction with media companies and advertisers, so that there's some kind of metric that you can compare to the gross rating point on TV. So that you can look at the campaign for the advertiser across all the screens. It's just, beyond C3 is the wild, wild west. And some people say, online and mobile, every year is going to be the year of mobile advertising. Well, until the advertiser really has, confidence that there's accountability there, that they're getting the audience that they paid for, it's going to give them a little more assurance. This falls into the category of easier said than done. Yeah. The engineering required with it, and it's an investment for both sides. Both sides are going to have to encode commercials. We're going to have to track commercials down to a 5-second spot. I mean, that's a big deal. But it's doable. It's all doable.
Which screen are they showing the most interest in?
I'm sorry?
Which screen is Madison Avenue showing the most interest in?
Well, it's, Macs and PCs online right now. Right. That's clearly it. Tablets are sort of the unknown for the time being until they're widely adopted, and mobile is mobile. What? The consumer goes to the best available screen. Right. Regardless of their age, if there's a flat screen, they want to be in front of it.
Right. Okay. We've just about run out of time, so I'm just going to do one. I see. One more question from the audience, and I'll have a wrap-up question.
Hi, my name is Javier Rivas, Bell Canada. So my question is more around the evolution of the architecture within the home for distributing video. So you scratched earlier on the topic of transcoding, and you said that that's probably in the works. The consumption of video through an over-the-top mechanism could trigger usage fees. So I don't know how much of that you have here in the States, but in Canada we have more.
Yeah. Canada's the land of fees, right?
Yeah, so, and on the cell phone as well, it triggers data consumption. Right. So my question is, are we heading towards a model where consumption of video for tablets or computers within the home is delivered through transcoding to perhaps avoid those usage fees? Or are we heading towards over the top, whether you're at home or outside the home?
Who wants to tackle that?
So in other words, where's the transcoding coming in for? What's the driver for transcoding?
So the discussion around transcoding in the home was really just to be able to get that content to other devices. So it can be transcoded in the home. It can be transcoded in the network. I mean, those are architectural decisions. The usage, though, once it's in the home, it's already been delivered. So however the usage models play out, you're already there. So I don't think that helps it or hurts it either way. It's just a decision about where's the most efficient place to put the transcoding. And I think there will be some in the house, but you're not going to deliver everything down to the home and then back out. So that means you're going to be in the network, or way cooler way to say it, in the cloud.
Okay.
To some extent, it's kind of handled by adaptive bitrate. So if you have multiple adaptive bitrate profiles and some of those are lower, I mean, it's just a question of telling the client to get a lower profile.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Okay. I had one quick last question, then we're going to finish up. I just want everybody to give me like a 5-word answer. Given the recent 3 months that Netflix has had, what advice would you give Reed Hastings in the new year?
What advice would you
give Reed Hastings, the head of Netflix, in the new year?
Well, he backed out Quickster, which was the biggest piece of advice. Mm-hmm. I might, rather than completely separating streaming, I'd reintegrate them and just introduce a graduated charge based on how many DVDs you're getting. So he does start to charge for the streaming content, but back out such a bifurcation of the service.
Okay, I'll let you slide. You went over the 5-word limit, but that's okay. Anybody else want to throw in any? Chime in?
See, 5 words. Netflix doesn't want my advice.
Well said.
Okay.
I'd say to Reed, take a deep breath and slow down.
Okay. Matt, you want the final word?
Advertisers want measurement. They want to know who's watching.
Okay.
They haven't proved that.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking the panel.
Okay.
Hey, nice meeting you.
Okay, so I promised you a panel of experts. We really gave you a panel of experts. These guys did a great job. Thank you all very much. Now.